So, To Your Eternity has officially debuted, and this was the last anime that I planned on reviewing on the channel that had yet to have its first episode released, and it was one of my more anticipated ones because it comes to us from the author who created A Silent Voice, and when you look into the production, when you look into even a synopsis, it feels like it's gonna be a tearjerker. Silent Voice was, and I heard this could be considered even more of a tearjerker. And a lot of times when episodes first debut, people will go to channels to check out videos to say, oh, should we look at this? Even though I personally think the ending and the overall journey of what you see in this episode, you probably have assumptions on where it will go after the first few minutes of the episode. I would highly suggest that you just go watch this episode if you haven't already, and then come back to the video. It's something that you have to experience in its entirety, hopefully unspoiled. This episode and this series, I truly think could be the best anime series of this season. And I've loved so many shows. I mean, I'm covering 15 shows on the channel this season, and there's even more than 15 shows that are worth watching in this season. But if this first episode is anything to go off of, and if the hype surrounding this series is to be believed, and seemingly the production is giving it their all, this production has been in development for a while. We're getting 20 episodes of this. It's an oddball episode count, but I think honestly, 20 episodes sounds great to me. I mean, the best way to sum down my feelings for this is it left me depressed, and on one hand not wanting to continue, but in a good way. It's one of those feelings where it hits you like a freight train. It hits you in such a way that you feel so many negative emotions, but the positivity of that glimmer of it almost feels like the best way that the creature that we follow in this series, who starts as an orb, turns to a rock, turns to a wolf, who then turns to a boy, it feels like while there's so much sadness about life, where things ultimately end and you end up without those connections, the beauty of life counters that, where there's always new and bright possibilities, and part of what it means to live is to experience the good and the bad. And that's a pretty powerful message, I think, because often when we use anime, we use it as an escape from reality, because reality can suck. There's a lot of bad things that happen on a day-to-day basis. But there's certain authors, and I truly believe the author of A Silent Voice and To Your Eternity is one of the rare ones who understands that we can show that negativity and we can show that depressing subject matter without simply just showing it just for a shocked reaction, but to show you something to make the next bright, positive aspect about life means so much more because you overcame that sadness. And anyone who's overcome depression knows that while it's difficult to overcome those bad moments, once you do, you find something eventually greater that makes the bad worth experiencing to get to that good. The journey of this episode, where you have a narrator, God by all rights of the definition, it feels like. Maybe it's not God, but it kind of gave me that assumption, and I like the idea of simply just like an orb was placed on the world, and that orb landed next to a rock, so it became a rock. There's apparently conditions it has to experience something to make it essentially evolve, I guess is probably the best way to put it. To see a wolf creature, I think it was a wolf, I'm not sure if it was a dog, either way it kind of gave me the impression of like a wolf dog. It's kind of wounded, it's on its journey, and it falls on the rock, so then the rock, because it experienced death, seemingly became the wolf, and it made its way back home to this lonely boy. And you knew it was gonna end bad, at least I knew it was, even though I didn't have anything spoiled for me here. It just gave me the impression that if we only have a boy who's so jumping for joy, he's being positive, he's using the wood from other people's in the village's homes as firewood, eventually the firewood's gotta run out, eventually the food's probably gonna run out, right? But I mean, he was doing pretty good. And I like the idea of having a character like him who, in the face of such disaster by the looks of it, is so positive. I mean, this pet was gone for 2 months, and he's so happy to see it return. I'm thinking to myself, my man, you're already alone where the village is gone, all the old people that were left are dead, and you didn't have your pet for 2 months? Man, that has to hurt. And to see him constantly talk to his pet, saying like, oh, hey, what do you want to do? Should we do this? He's always talking because there's no one left to talk back to him. That type of isolation is not healthy, and I think having any sort of pet of some sort is like the only way to not go insane. And I sort of imagine before we reached the hut, when obviously the spirit or the creature took over the pet's role, I have a feeling he was probably talking to himself saying, you know, I bet you're out there getting food, you're probably getting fat, you know, you're probably enjoying your best life, but I hope you come home soon. And to just watch the build up where you have this stunning OST, I don't even know how to explain it. The OST, on one hand, I want to say is peaceful, but on the other hand, I feel like it's too painful to be called peaceful. It's this type of OST that, honestly, the two stars of this episode were the voice actor's performance of the boy and the soundtrack both telling a story, because as the episode progresses, the happiness and optimism of this character grows weaker and weaker as you just have a silent wolf just watching and observing what this boy is going to do. As you have the OST feel very positive and peaceful, slowly transition into despair and disaster. I can honestly say out of every anime I've seen, and I'm getting close to, I think, closer to 1,000 completed series, this is the type of OST that isn't simply just there as a backdrop, something to fill the scene, and while it can fill the scene well, most OSTs aren't designed to tell a story in the same way that something like To Your Eternity does. And it's some of the best directing of a musical score I have personally seen in the anime medium. To just have something transition the same way as this voice actor is, as he goes from so cheerful to pure on depression, and even in his dying moments is still trying to care for his wolf. I mean, it was just such a interesting experience, and I can understand why this manga is so beloved by so many, and I can already tell that unless something went completely off the rails later in the production, I'm sure the mangaka is very, very pleased with this adaptation so far. When they ultimately decide to leave, and I mean, there was one moment where he slips in and he falls into icy water. I literally let out an audible gasp. I was like, no, I know this is gonna happen, but give them a year or two before you do this to me. And then to see him all cheerful, like no matter what happened, he was so positive. And that type of positivity is rare in life. And even though it was fake, even though it was a lie, to be able to live in such isolation and still try to be a positive influence even for an animal, I think it goes to show how good of a character he truly was. And to eventually reach the point where clearly there's no mountains or there's nothing left for them, you're born in a place that is just too far off from the rest of the world. It's so heartbreaking to see him like admit that you have never been talking to me, you have never been saying it, I've been saying this all myself, and they make it back home, but it's too late at that point. I mean, the food's pretty much gone, there's not enough wood probably, he's wounded with his leg, he probably had an infection that turned to a fever. If you have a fever in that environment, how are you going to do it, right? It just felt like we were building up to something, and at that point, I realized that he probably was going to take over the boy's role, but I was curious to see what would be the end outcome for this character, because even if he's only going to be there for one episode, this was already a character I wished to see have a positive end, and to see him have like a sort of afterlife type sequence where, whether it was literal or whether it was something just for the viewer, I love the idea of seeing him, you know, see his friends and his family, the new people, and him just saying, I'm not alone anymore. And that's what makes, I think, such a depressing scene turn a bit more optimistic, where, yes, this character ended up dead. Yes, this character didn't get to see what he did, but even if it was a fever dream before he ultimately died, I think that's enough for a character like him, and since the wolf ended up taking his place, he's going to be able to experience what this boy couldn't, given the fact that I don't even know if he even needs to eat or anything, right? I mean, he was a rock for so long, then turned to a wolf, to then turn to a boy. But the wonders of life, the good and the bad, watching a character like that learn and grow and probably have to experience a lot of loss throughout the journey. I mean, the show's called To Your Eternity. I have a feeling eternity is going to be how long this character will live for, and if that's the case, there's going to be a lot of loss in this character's life. A lot of times when we see sappy shows or shows meant to make you cry or feel things, a lot of times authors just do it with shocking deaths, but this wasn't a shocking death. It was a death we expected, but the direction of seemingly a character who doesn't know what emotion is watching emotions and watching some of the most painful emotions. It's really good. It's definitely, I already think, a masterpiece of an anime, and I really believe this could be this season's best, and there's a lot of amazing shows this season, but I guess we'll see. I think it will be fun watching the good and the bad, but let me know your thoughts and feelings on this week's episode of To Your Eternity, and how excited are you for more? Let me know your thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, share your support, and remember to hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.